And the context of tariffs and maybe historically and what role they play now.
So I remind people that on the earth there was the Dark Ages. So the Dark Ages meant that the world knew how to read. And then because of religious and other actions, they burned all the books.
Yeah. Right.
And literally, the earth stopped learning how to read for 500 years or 400 years. We didn't know how to read. And we knew how to read before. So how could you forget? So America was built on tariffs with no income tax. No income tax till 1913. None. Greatest, richest country in the world. So when Donald Trump says, make America great again, what he's talking about is from 1880 to 1913, when the country had so much money that we had blue ribbon commissions, which you guys would have been on, right? To try to figure out how to spend the money, right? And no income tax. Then we put in the income tax in 1913. Why? Because we're entering World War I.
Yeah.
And don't we all need to contribute to protect democracy and to protect our way of life, right? Then what happens is the world goes into chaos. We come out of chaos, right? And then we're starting to think of, well, what do we do? What do we do? And then 1929, the stock market crashes, right? 1933, we start to say, oh God, we forgot. We need to do tariffs. 1933, how can you do tariffs when the markets crash, the world's going into depression, and you're going to do tariffs in 1933? You can't charge the rest of the world money unless the rest of the world's okay.
That's right.
So it was too little, too late, right? So then we come out of World War II. It's 1945. We need to rebuild the world. Okay, so we decide we're going to take our tariffs down. And we'll let them, here's the key, we'll let them have tariffs be up. And we will export the power of our economy to let them rebuild. And we'll let them rebuild. And that's what happened. So 1945, we have the Marshall Plan, right? And we do it in Japan, of course, because they need to be rebuilt. What's the difference, right? So they need to be rebuilt. And then what happens? We have the 50s, and we have the Korean War. So we let them rebuild, which means low tariffs here, high tariffs there. Low tariffs here, high tariffs there. Then we have the Vietnam War, right? So now all of a sudden we have all of Southeast Asia. Low tariffs here, high tariffs there. You know what the best example I can give you to make it crystal clear? Kuwait. We spend almost $100 billion freeing Kuwait, right? You know who has the highest tariffs against the United States of America? The number one country with the highest tariffs against the United States of America. Kuwait. And you think, what? That's insane. But here's what it is. If you go back to this understanding the way America thinks, you need to be rebuilt. You were just destroyed, right? All their oils were, you remember Red, the guy's name was Red something, and he was the guy who capped there were fires in all the oil wells, and he capped them all, and it was amazing. So we let them put up high tariffs. But you know what the problem is? Then we forget.
Right.
And we let it go.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump comes in and says, it's got to stop.
Okay, so that's an incredible context now for tariffs. It's like, it was a long-term strategy that essentially says, okay, great, there's rebuilding to be done, sort of almost out of the largesse of America. We're going to enable that to happen. So we'll lower tariffs here, and we'll support the high tariff regimes over there.
We let it happen.
We let it happen.
On purpose.
But it's an incredible thing you're also saying, though, which is that it's inexorably linked to this repetitive machinery of war, because those create these boundary conditions over and over again.
Always.
Where there's so much destruction abroad that America then feels compelled to have to do this.
Correct.
And
that's exactly right. So what happens is, and then you say to yourself, okay, I get the 40s, I get the 50s, I get the 70s, right? But 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010, what? It's time out. So Donald Trump gets elected 2016. Who understands this? Okay, let me give you a hint. Donald J. Trump. Who else? Nobody.
Yeah.
Right? You'd say, wow, he understands. And how long has he been talking about it? 40 years.
Yeah.
Why? Because in the 80s, he's saying, what are you doing?
Well, let me give you the economist's counter, and then you can respond to it, which is tariffs on imports in the United States will ultimately pass to the consumer. Higher prices, inflationary. So the things that our consumers, that our citizens are buying gets more expensive. And as a result, they buy less. And it's recessionary. It shrinks the economy. It shrinks spending. It shrinks consumption. Can you kind of respond to that's the typical economist refrain on this, independent, and maybe they're isolating the imbalance?
Okay. India has a 50% tariff on average. 50. We have on average 4. Okay? I would say to the person who said that, can I ask you a question? What are you talking about? They're 50 and 4. Well, here's what you're talking about. When we're all equal and everything is free and fair, if you raise tariffs and they raise tariffs, isn't it bad for society? The answer is, of course it is. But there's 2 differences. Number 1, let's do human beings first. Before we go to the math, let's go to human beings. Once upon a time, we had an auto industry in Detroit, okay, and in Ohio, but Detroit. Then some genius named Bill Clinton signs the North American Free Trade Agreement, or corporations, you can screw Americans and go get cheap labor in Mexico and break the unions by going to Canada. Now, if you were General Motors, I'd say, it's like my birthday.
Yeah.
But if you're a worker who comes from Michigan or Ohio, they just signed, you know what they signed? Worst statistic I'm going to tell you today. Average life expectancy of high school educated workforce. So, by the way, United States of America, 2/3 is high school educated, 1/3 is college educated. The difference today of average life expectancy between those 2 categories is 7 years. 7-year average life expectancy. It's not the air. It's not the food. It's not the medicine. It's despair. My grandfather worked in the auto factory. My father worked in the auto factory. I have a good life. I'm going to do Friday night lights and football. I mean, it's going to be a good life. I have a good middle-class life. I'm a member of the United Auto Workers. Life is going to be good. The factory moves to Mexico, and I am just screwed because the government of the United States of America didn't care about industrial policy and didn't protect me at all, and let cheap labor in Mexico. I'm sure the Mexican people went from $4 an hour to $5 an hour, and they're kicking it. But I destroyed you, and that is incredible failure of industrial policy, which nobody wants to talk about. But you talk about it as average life expectancy, and you're talking about reshoring and building the life for the people who are America. That's why you elect Donald Trump president. You elect him because I didn't spend 1 minute doing politics until he asked me to help him. But when he asked me to help him, I started spending time with him. When did I learn this? And who taught me this? The President of the United States. This is not me teaching him. You understand? This is him teaching me, and you can see him talking about it in the 80s, right? He's been talking about this for, and what it does is it means reshore. So, number 1, we have to care about human beings. That's a globalist view. Yes, if I take my production and move it to Mexico, it's better for me, Mr. Corporation. Okay? But it's not better for me, Mr. U.S. citizen of the United States of America who's working at a car plant. That's bad news for him. Okay? And that's number 1. And now let's go to number 2, which is the math of it all. If we say free and fair trade, I want to remind you, there ain't no such thing. There is no country in this world that is free trade. 0. And we are the lowest and the dumbest because everybody else is higher and more protective.
Yeah.
So they protect their farmers. Here, I'm sitting at the dinner Modi comes to town. And I say to him, when Donald Trump, we have dinner, And after the niceties, Donald said, go ahead, Howard. And I said, you have 1.4 billion people. And you brag to us how amazing your economy is. Why won't you buy a bushel of our corn? You won't buy a bushel of our corn? So our farmers can't go to him, but his, of course, can come at us. Right? Why is that okay? And we can go into all the stuff that, I don't even want to go into it because if I had another hour, I could regale you with stories that are fun with that. But
just address the pricing inflation that arises from tariffs. Talk to the average person who says the cost of a toy at Walmart just went up by 50%.
Okay. Inflation comes from printing more money. Okay, let's say the United States of America had $1 trillion. That's all we have. That's it. No more. Okay, and I want to buy a bottle of water and you want to buy a bottle of water. One came from America and the other one came from Fiji, right? And I tariff Fiji. Then that water is $1.25 and this water is $1. That's not inflation. That means that one's more expensive. But I can choose to buy this one.
Right.
Okay, so you're right. This toy might be more expensive and that toy's not. I get it, but that's not inflation. Here's inflation. Snap my fingers, now we have $2 trillion, right? That water's $1.50, that water's $1.25. Yeah, everything's more expensive.
That's inflation.
Okay, so inflation without tariffs is everything's $1.25.
Now, what
inflation with tariffs is $1.25, right, and $1.50. And so you have to understand inflation doesn't come from tariffs. Certain products, if I put a tariff on a mango, right? We can't grow mangoes in America. We just can't grow a mango. If you put a tariff on a mango, the mango would be more expensive.
Yes.
Okay, but if the president chose to put a tariff on a mango, then the mango is more expensive. That just becomes a consumption tax. It's like a sales tax,
Yes.
right? It's a sales tax. It's a consumption tax. If I want to buy a mango, it costs more money.
And you can offset that with a reduction in income tax.
That's just like another version of income tax.
How do you
Okay,
think
so
about,
the idea is to not do that.
Yeah.
That's the idea. The idea is to choose things that are going to reshore.
Yeah, exactly.
Come here.
This is so important.
Hire my people.
Yeah.
Bring it home.
Yeah.
Right?
And by the way, I want to just speak as an entrepreneur. I see the economic incentive. When I see the price for certain things go higher because you have to import and pay a tariff, I'm like, why don't we make that here? We should be doing that. And there's going to be a lot of that kind of entrepreneurial opportunity that will arise from making things. And this is just how the markets work. Someone will say
$2 trillion so far. I mean, he's been in office, right? Like 7 weeks, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
$2 trillion of committed domestic production coming back because of his tariffs. TMC saying, I'll build, semiconductor wafers.
Yeah.
Arizona. Everything we do, they're going to build it here. That word is never coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless the tariff. So what happens is you bring it here, you create the jobs here, and then they avoid the tariff.
And by the way, those jobs are better paying and they're more productive than the government funded.
What do you want to do about like the narrow set of products that are more high value than the mango that maybe can't be made here, or at least can't be made here in the next 5 to 10 years? So TSMC can make chips. I think that's great. ASML, who makes the extremely complicated lithography machines, as an example, can't necessarily do that for another 5 or 6 years here. So there's these narrow cases where tariffs can exploit a market or perturb a market where there is no multi-vendor solution, right? But it's still critical. How do you think about that set of stuff?
The beauty of putting Donald Trump in the White House is it's giant three-dimensional chess.
Yeah.
Okay? So we all have Stockholm Syndrome for the Internal Revenue Service. We think we like the Internal Revenue Service. And we don't say it, but when we say we're going to charge a tariff, and other countries who lean on us, who rely on us, who bleed on us, who can't live without the oxygen that is our economy. Because remember, the thing about our economy is, while we have a $29 trillion GDP, we are the consumer of 20 trillion.
Yeah, right.
And this is the key thing. We buy everybody's stuff. So who's more important? The let's say they have an economy that produces stuff, and we have an economy that buys stuff.
Yeah.
The customer is always right. We all know the customer is always right, because if no one buys it, they can't produce it.
Right.
So everybody needs our economy. When? Now. I mean, to the fact that China consumes less than 10 trillion and primarily tries to figure out how to sell it to itself.
Yeah.
Right? So they don't buy anybody else's stuff.
Right.
So we are the world's consumer.
Yes.
We're the world's customer.
Right.
Right? So that's point number one. So we want them to come here, and if they can't come here, what if you pass? Okay, now let's say there was a 20% tariff, and in order to sell his goods, he knows he can raise the price 10%, but he can't really raise it 20. So he eats 10, and the price goes up 10. Let's just say that 20 goes into the coffers of the United States of America from the President of the United States, who said we're going to balance the budget, and then his goal is to drive down income tax in the United States of America, including waiving tax. So what has he said so far? With that in his pocket, knowing that this is what we're going to try to do, what does he announce? No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. Why is he saying those things? Right? Because he knows that he's got Elon's going to cut and Howard's going to raise, and he's going to have the tools to deliver on his promise.
And that'll unlock
literally
spending.
the money.
More money for folks to spend.
And they'll have more money to spend, right? So if you actually get the External Revenue Service, right, which of course I named, you know I named it, but you know what the funny part is? I came up with the name, I wrote a truth, right? And I sent it to DJT, and I wrote, this is my huge idea, you know, with one of those things that goes like this.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like,
In
this is my
iMessage.
huge idea.
Yeah.
And it goes, right? And because it's the External Revenue Service.
Yeah.
But